American culture has a long history of changing the stories of survivors to better fit its own self-serving agenda. And it is well documented that the United States government systematically released false public propaganda while stealing land from the original inhabitants of this country. American culture is a culture built on harms inflicted against both groups and individuals, and rape culture is a significant part of those historical roots. The effects of rape culture are much farther wrought than what we see within the confines of gendered dialogue. Before we get started with today's segment, we seek to respectfully honor the land currently called the United States of America and its original inhabitants. As we honor our Earth and Native peoples, please consider the ways that reconciling rape culture within yourself will contribute to dismantling the harm caused against both groups and individuals through the overuse and exploitation of resources for monetary gain. We gather here today on Turtle Island, the Indigenous term for the North American continent. The Earth is our greatest resource, and Turtle Island is rich with cultures that nurtured and protected our Earth for all. To the east, in New York City, the land of the Lenape, the river that flows both ways, was home to abundant natural resources and well-developed communities. The original infrastructure of the Lenape peoples can still be seen in the map of modern Manhattan. The Lenape are still here, now called the Delaware Nation, and located throughout New Jersey, Oklahoma, and Canada. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Delaware Nation, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. In Washington, D.C., we are gathered on the unceded land of the Piscataway, Lumbee, and Cherokee peoples. The Piscataway, called the people where the rivers blend, were farmers, many revered for their hunting and fishing skills, and their well-established communities that stretched to and through Baltimore, the Chesapeake Bay, and Virginia. The Piscataway are still here, and the Piscataway people still preserve their native traditions, customs, and memories as seen through Piscataway eyes. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Piscataway community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. To the south, Puerto Rico, called the island of Boriken by the Taino and Arawakan peoples, remains an unceded, unincorporated territory of the United States. The Arawakan were complex in culture, social structure, and spirituality, with democratically determined governing systems and matriarchal households. And the Taino introduced European settlers to many implements still used in modern living. The Taino peoples are still here, the great people of the sacred high waters, and they continue to preserve their tribal traditions, spiritual practices, and cultural heritage, while seeking recognition as the authentic people of the island of Boriken. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Taino community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. To the west, California is home to more people of Native heritage than any other state in the United States. There are currently 109 federally recognized Indian tribes in California, and 78 entities petitioning for recognition. In the greater Los Angeles, there are 14 federally recognized tribes, and the land is still home to 3 federally unrecognized tribes that predate the establishment of the California missions: the Chumash, Tongva, and Tataviam peoples. The Chumash peoples consisted of a diverse conglomeration of autonomous settlements that existed along the coast since before 7000 BCE, and were known as bead makers, herbalists, artists, and basket weavers. The Chumash are still here, and continue to preserve their myths and legends while promoting sustainable agriculture and healthy diets within their community and beyond. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Chumash community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. To the north, the Indigenous peoples of Canada are the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations. The Indigenous cultures of Canada are vast and far-reaching, and had formed complex social, political, economic, and cultural systems long before Europeans came to North America. In 2016, more than 1.6 million Canadians identified as Indigenous, and the population steadily grows thanks to increased life expectancy, higher birth rates, and the ongoing work of reconciliation being carried out in recent years. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Indigenous cultures of our Turtle Island, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. While a land acknowledgement is not enough to stand alone as a decolonial social justice tool, it serves as a reminder that we are on sacred land. Indigenous Americans, with cultures just as vast and diverse as those named here today, have acted as stewards of the sacred lands of Turtle Island, our forests, rivers, and meadows, for over 14,000 years, maintaining the balance of the earth for all beings on this planet. Enslaved Africans used their own hands, sweat, and blood to build the American economy as we currently know it. By acknowledging this history, we can find truthful relations, both to ourselves and our Earth, and will more effectively shape the future of this and other planets. Colonization is still an ongoing process, and native lands are still occupied due to broken treaties, practices of eminent domain, and other mechanisms intended solely for the benefit of government or corporate America. May our actions today work to reconcile the repeated violations of rape culture in order to create a safer world for our next 7 generations.
Hi, everyone.
Everyone.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight?
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Should we reintroduce yourselves? I think we have a new guest,
I
right?
think so.
So, my name is Sue, or my full name is Dasu. Dasutin. Sorry, I lost my voice earlier in the protest. Today, I was outside the Chinese embassy. So, yeah.
No worries.
So, bear with me. If you can't hear me, let me know, and I can try to speak louder.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
good. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me.
I'm Valu, and this is my second time joining the conversations. Nice to meet you.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Tamika Spellman.
I'm Tosin.
Tamika Spellman, Policy Advocacy Director for HITS in Washington, D.C.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Tosin. I was here last week as well.
I'm Melly. I was here last week as well. Yeah, good to have you, Sue.
Thank you.
Oh, I just realized I was muted. Hi, I'm Erin. I was here last week as well. It's nice to meet you, Sue.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Well, recently, I guess, meet you in this setting.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I guess we should start the conversation. We have a question there standing about what is rape. Who would like to start?
Ooh.
It's a heavy
It's
one.
a heavy one.
I know.
Yeah, it's a heavy one.
Yeah, I can start. I think rape for me just means like anything that crosses a boundary. And it's really difficult, I think, to describe sometimes because there's so much gray area that comes with rape. And this gray area makes people confused, and I think it especially like causes the victims to feel confused and start to blame themselves when we don't know, like I don't know. For example, with gray areas, it's like, could I have spoken up more? Could I have done this more? And at the end of the day, it's like, this person crossed your boundaries. And to be able to validate that, I think is the biggest process in the healing.
To me,
And so,
go on. Go ahead. Okay. To me, even when
Can
I
you hear me?
wasn't consenting, I was still not heard or respected. The bulk of the times that I have been assaulted were by officers of the law, and saying no to them meant nothing. Not responding meant nothing. When you don't say yes, that's rape. I did not consent. I was not okay with it. I cried through all of the processes. So they knew what they were doing. It was the power dynamic that turned them on. Rape is when you are not consenting to any sexual activity.
Chelsea, you got disconnected.
Yes, I was gonna say I'm glad Tamika used the word consent. I was gonna say anything that happens to your body without your consent is considered rape, where somebody else is taking pleasure from your body and you have no authority, and your authority to say yes is taken away from you. That's rape. So consent is a very big word. Thank you, Tamika, for using that word.
I think also, like, we define rape as being like about power and control, about that dynamic, not about like a sexual act. That is part of it sometimes, but rape can occur like in other ways as well. And so I think looking at it as this is also like it's a big issue of power and control, like that happens to your body. Like I think if we extrapolate out, like talking about rape culture, I think there's like lots of ways in which our society sort of is the rape is the primary means of production. So yeah, no, I think I would just add that and yeah, like a violation, right? Like crossing the boundary and violating. And I think it's also important to like not define it just as the act, right? Like it is what comes after as well, right? We talked about trauma this week, and so I think putting in the like intensity of the trauma there is a little up too, I would say.
Absolutely.
For me, rape is, I agree with what everyone is saying, and I would like to add a little bit. I've worked with, because I'm also an Indigenous, I've been working with a lot of missing and murdered Indigenous women cases. And within those cases, because they're in a legal loophole where where Indigenous police cannot prosecute non-Indigenous folks for sexually taking advantage of non-consenting individuals. And the FBI is not doing anything about it. So there's this loophole where there's thousands of women that are raped, missing, and murdered. And these cases happen because you're right. Like there's a sense of power dichotomy that takes place, and people, especially white serial rapists, go into Indigenous land and create atrocities, and they have no um, legal ramifications. So then they continue to do it because it's an easier targeting method. And so power is a huge play, consent is a huge play. And also these are from throughout the centuries, like this is a tool used against women specifically to disempower folks. And also I would like to say, folks that are non-binary and also men also get raped. And we also need to acknowledge that as well. I don't think it's a gendered issue. I think it's an every human issue, because if you have a body, you have your autonomous right to that body. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a really good point that you said, that you mentioned. I think it's a practice that has been used for centuries to take away, like their power, like somebody's power, and it's been used in wars. It's been used, to manipulate and control someone. I'd be interested in considering also, like, what happens when you are forced to say yes because you are afraid that you are going to be maybe hit, or maybe like hurt in a different, just hurt in a different way, hit verbally and physically. So
Or even lose your job.
or that you might lose
Yeah.
your job.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like what are the ramifications of that? Because you are saying yes because you are trying to protect yourself somehow, but but at the end of the day, you really don't want to do that, right?
I think what you're speaking to, Vilo, is like what I was mentioning before about that gray area. And I hear this all the time when I was working with sexual assault survivors, which was like, well, I said yes, but I was afraid. I was afraid that this was going to happen to me. And so then that causes the sense of guilt, the sense of like responsibility, when it's not really their fault because they're still being manipulated. And I think that, hurts sometimes, like in a different way than just being forced into it, because it's another layer of your power being taken away.
Right.
Coercion.
Right. And there's also the cases where this abuse is perpetrated by the clergy or family members, like, and then the biggest crime out of this is that nobody believes you when you speak about it. Like, I work with men who've been abused from childhood by trusted community advocates, community members, family members, and they haven't been able to get any justice because nobody believes them. And then they become like almost like the perpetrators of their own crime, because it's like, you can't speak about that because how dare you say that out loud in our family, at our dinner or anything like that. And then they become ostracized from their family. So the rape culture it's absolutely insane.
And it doesn't matter about
Mm-hmm.
what race you are. People don't talk about it.
No.
Yes.
That family violence that happened.
Yeah.
It's something that even when I brought it up, I wasn't thought about it in this whole process. When I talked about it, they went to that person and told them what I said. That person continued to abuse me. So when we are naming our trauma, we have to be thoughtful about who we're naming it to.
Absolutely.
You can't tell everybody. You cannot tell all your family members. Sometimes your best way to deal with that trauma is to talk to a professional, because they're there for you solely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the family members are going to look to see who they can place blame on.
Yes.
And I'm not looking for any blame to be placed. I want a resolution to the problem, because in all, it is hurting me while they're going on with their life and they're happy-go-lucky. I'm suffering. I suffered for a long time through drug use. And I am a walking miracle to still be here. I was trying to kill myself for many years, using thousands of dollars of drugs in a day. And it wasn't working, so I had to figure out something different.
Right. You know, both Tamika and Tosin mentioned something really interesting. And, you know, speaking also from the male perspective, from the man, really. I mean, I try to not use male and female, but women and men. But, you know, that's why the whole issue of fighting for gender equality matters for all of us. Because, for example, the majority of, you know, like suicide attempts that are successful happen to men. That doesn't necessarily mean that women don't attempt suicide. It's just that men's methods are way more violent, so they are more successful. People can get to them in time to, you know, to avoid it, to prevent it.
Absolutely.
So the problem with, you know, like with these stereotypes that happen in our society is that, you know, as a man, you're not expected to seek for help, right? I can't imagine you, Tamika. I mean, like before your transition, how, you know, like how that play in you know, in regard, right? You know, like somebody like trying to speak up, and then, you know, society pushes you down, like you can't speak, you know, like be a man, or, you know, like boys don't cry. So that puts a big toll in, you know, in the person who is, you know, in the survivor, uh, and
Toxic.
in the process of healing, right? And as Samika was saying, I mean, it's important to sometimes, you know, like mention the trauma and recognize it, but to really be mindful of who you're talking to it about it.
You made a point about, and when you were saying what you just said, all I keep thinking about is toxic masculinity, and how you have, you know, it's so pervasive. You know, it's like you can't say anything because you have to be a man, and you being a man means you have to be able to take abuse and keep your head up straight and keep going about your life and like nothing happened to you. And how dare you cry? You know, like you're not allowed to show any emotion, and you can't heal if you don't show the emotion. If you know, if you can't acknowledge that something's happened to you, then you can't start the healing process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that cycles into another type of trauma, like where there on the flip side, where there's like a gendered norm where sexual assault is acceptable, you know, especially in positions of power, and that toxic masculinity is like feeling entitled to a person's body. And whether you say yes or no, like that doesn't matter, because as a man with privilege, like you're used to this answer yes. And when, like for me, when I say no, I get called the B word or every other thing, you know, when I assert my own autonomy. And so, like, that's something that is in conjunction where when we're addressing rape culture, there's also dismantling patriarchy. You know, there's also the dehumanizing of people of color. And so people of color's pain is seen as less than. You know, going from like hospitals for our treatment to rape culture, where if a person of color is saying something, oh, they're the angry black person, or they're the whatever, you know, and that's not okay.
They call us crazy.
Yeah, call us crazy. Yeah. And it's not a point of belief or not. And it's very heart-wrenching to hear that you're not able to speak your truth, you know, especially right now in the DMV area, with Black Lives Matter and other groups. There's a lot of rape cases going on that's happening right now, and I've been in those discussions as well, and also with the Indigenous community. And there's a lot of men that are saying, "Yeah, we're supporting missing and murdered Indigenous women," and then at the same time, in the same breath, calling women B words, and then like taking advantage of people. Me personally, I've been ostracized from a community where I said no to a very powerful person who, after I was done doing his radio show, he said, and I quote, "Your butt looks juicy," and smacked my butt. As I was walking out the door, he was saying that I'm going to be a gentleman and I'm going to open the door for you. So I walked through, and that's when he thought he was entitled to my body. I know that's not rape, but that's a part of this toxic masculinity that we're talking about. So I just wanted to like add that to the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that might not be rape, but that's still assault.
Sexual,
You know,
that's
like
sexual
that.
assault. I was gonna say
Yeah.
that, absolutely.
Yeah.
He lucky it was you, because if it was me, he would have got slapped.
And
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes you don't know how you react, right? Like I've been
freeze.
grabbed.
Yeah.
I've been grabbed, you know, like in my front, in my back, and sometimes you just don't know. I mean, like your brain freezes, and sometimes you react and you smack. So it you know, it's really a flight or fight reaction depending on, you know, your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I fight back today. I fight back today because I'm tired of people hurting me.
Sure.
It's gonna be either y'all gonna kill me, or I'm gonna walk away from this situation. You're not getting ready to abuse me any further.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think like that's like why it is so important to name it, you know, like in our healing, because we need to really communicate it with the gravity and the intensity of how harmful it is, you know, and that it is like long reaching. And I think, you know, part of healing is naming it to ourselves, right? Like this is what happened, and you know, being firm and hopefully supported in that, not often enough at all, you know.
Right.
But yeah, like I think sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
Yeah, no. I think naming it is really important. Like it's one of the things, especially like because we know that a lot of assaults and a lot of abuse come with power dynamics, come with manipulation. Like survivors like often blame themselves and are gaslit, like not only by the people that are assaulting them, but like also by society as a whole. And so like when we say rape, when we say incest, when we say sexual assault, like, you know, we are like claiming the intensity of that, like, and putting that into the story, into the narrative, you know, that we use to heal and to, you know, to speak out.
Yeah, I think like, you know, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes your brain goes on autopilot in those situations. And for me, when I've experienced those situations, my autopilot is like, you know, minimizing it and just saying like, oh, they didn't mean to do that. Like, I don't understand how that even happened. Like it, you know, I would just push it aside. And so by naming it and like actually talking about it, we're confronting the gravity of the issue and how it is not okay, and it's allowing us to take the power back into ourselves. And one other thing I wanted to mention was that the first person that you share your experience with, your assault with, it can really determine whether or not you develop PTSD. Because that person, if they are invalidating, if they blame you, that's really where PTSD is coming from. It's like this feeling like of I can't be safe in my own body, like that I had something to do with it. So really like choosing who to share with, again, is very, very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also like within the greater communities, like what can we do to stand in solidarity to prevent this rape culture? Because right now I feel like even though there's a lot of good intentions in nonprofits, grassroots organizations, there's still a lot from the permaculture community to different communities fighting for sovereignty, because not everyone has done the internal work to dismantle patriarchy inside of themselves, or like not fully understand rape culture and then go forward. um, there's a lot of opposition, even though like right now it's savvy to say like I'm with her, or the Me Too movement, but where's the actual resolve? Like what can we actually do to you know to reach some type of solidarity? Because even if a woman stands up, or a man stands up, or a non-binary person stands up, like, okay, what now? I mean, a lot of people of color don't trust the police, right? So can we take a legal way? How do we hold community members accountable without having the victim having to sit in front of the perpetrator?
Yeah.
Because that's usually the resolve.
Yeah.
That's what happened in Claymont in 2019, when they hired a man who physically assaulted a permaculture teacher, and is a part of a men's rights group. And he's holding a teaching position where he's teaching young girls on plantation land, doing things from Native people that are not allowed. So no permission given. So cultural appropriation, rape culture, all of that balled up together. And, for me, when I personally was trying to advocate, to not have him in a position of power, I was ostracized and seen as crazy. And, you know, and then also the other two Native women were also seen as crazy. So I don't understand. Like, what
In
can
your
we
own
really do?
community, Sue?
In the permaculture community,
Okay.
there's also a case going on with Black Lives Matter, where there's like rape in the DC area. A few of my friends are involved in that case right now. So in the grassroots organizations, that's what I'm talking about. Like, what can we really, like, I think that this conversation is necessary for us to really think about the solutions of, okay, we know this is a problem, let's dismantle it. How do we get there? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think what we're doing here right now is the first step, where we're bringing awareness that there's an issue and something needs to be done. But I believe above this, I think we just need to do a better job as a society believing victims and validating victims before we say, well, maybe that didn't happen. Let's have a trial. Let's do this. Let's do that. But I think just validating and trusting that a victim might actually be a victim it goes a long way, especially in preventing PTSD, like you mentioned. Those are the necessary first steps. Now, where we go from there, that's something that, as a community and organizations, have to come together and figure out. But I believe they saying this is a problem, identifying the problem, is a great first step.
Yeah.
I agree.
There was a comment from somebody online that from Liana Algarin. People call you crazy in a desperate attempt to discredit you or gaslight you, which is totally accurate. It's extremely true. One thing that I wanted to say is that I work as a social media uh, strategist for an organization called the ERA Coalition, and what they're trying to do is actually push for the Equal Rights Amendment, which hasn't really passed, and it's been almost 100 years since they started working on that. And one of the things that I do really believe is that in order for at least some sort of more gender equality in this country that needs to be addressed in the Constitution. I know that it's not going to be like once it's there, like everything is going to be perfect and beautiful, but at least, you know, like you have some sort of, you know, like a legal support to, you know, like to get your case heard. It will be a step in the right direction, I believe. And, you know, like more work on the ground as well, and grassroots activities. Somebody is saying that, oh, you can't hear Tosin? Is anybody else hearing me?
I'm able to hear you.
I can hear
Okay.
now. I can hear now.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, great.
So I think like one thing you alluded to was about the reporting process. And I just want to bring awareness of how traumatic like the reporting process can be, and why so many women and men and survivors don't report. It's like, basically, in order to go to the police and go through court, you're going through so many levels of people questioning whether your trauma was valid, whether that impact on you was real and valid. And then having to face the perpetrator, having to face like, and tell your story over and over again. And then most times when people report, they're not met with like, you know, acceptance. They're often met with, you're a liar and you're crazy, like you said. And I think that is where one part that we can start to reform is that, you know, like a woman shouldn't have to go to a rape center right after being raped and then have the doctors stick something, you know, up them in order to gather evidence for that to be valid, for their pain to be valid. One thing we have to recognize is that intention doesn't equal impact. And so much of the defense from the perpetrator side is, oh, well, I didn't intend to do that. Well, the fact that we're having this conversation, the fact that we're sitting in front of court right now shows the gravity, shows how much impact that you've had on this victim. And so that's one thing that we can start to bring forth to light, like, you know, how much reporting is like really low, and also how can we encourage what survivors to report and like support their stories.
There needs to be a wide range of options. You know, everybody doesn't want to go through the whole process of having someone prosecuted, but just to be able to report this person so that it's known. You know, we need to be able to report anonymously. I don't want my name and face plastered all over the world. You know, it's enough to deal with the trauma than to be traumatized again because of 1,001 people coming at me asking me what happened.
Yeah.
Once I've told you my story, that should be it. Stop asking me. Stop trying to slip me up and make me say something else. Mm-hmm. Once I've told you what it is, leave it there. They're not being thoughtful about the trauma that they're causing in order to get to the bottom of the problem.
Yeah, it's traumatizing. And like
more trauma on top of the trauma.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, part of that too is we need to widen, like there needs to be a range of options, and also like a much more like a much wider window of when people can report, right? Because the statute of limitations is way less than it should be. And, you know, a lot of times people are like so traumatized afterward that they can't even name what's occurred, right? If we go back to naming it. And so like, you know, not that I think that the legal route like works, but at least to have there be a window for people to like get healing, right? And that I think goes with our culture and trying to change like how people are met. Like you should be met the same way whether you were raped yesterday or 5 years ago, you know, because for some people it can take 5 years to even be able to talk about it, you know.
Exactly.
You know, I'm thinking also. Oh, sorry.
There shouldn't be a statute of limitation on violent crimes. You know, so even if, like for murder, there is not a statute of limitation on it. But you can violate my body, and in 5 years, it's not valid anymore.
Right.
That doesn't make a bit of sense. There should be some kind of accountability, even if it isn't, I'm trying to prosecute you and have you jailed.
Yeah. I think for people to also understand what they went through. I mean, I didn't go to school here, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that there is actually, like a national program for like sexual educations, and I think a lot of, like religious communities also prevent, like certain like schools from actually receiving any sort of education. So I think like younger people there, like that's needed. I think like, like talking about consent and talking about their right to their bodies, and talking about what rape means and what, like no means no. That could help also, like people know if they went through a situation like that, or to really understand that no means no, and it's okay to stop at a certain point. It doesn't matter what, where they at, if it's a kiss, or if it's, like if it's like halfway, like when it's like when consent stops, then it has to stop. So I think that is important, like involving the younger generations, and like talking about it from early, and even beyond, before high school, I would say.
It's also important to make it back to your point about like how sexual assault is a violent crime, and how with murder we don't have people asking, why did you report earlier? What were you doing? What were you wearing? These kind of questions is so normalized in our society, and of the questioning of the victim.
The victim blaming, victim shaming.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's because we don't equate like sexual assault to the same degree as other violent crimes.
Exactly, because they're not going to ask you, well, what was the victim of that murder wearing?
Right.
They're
Exactly.
not going to say, were they LGBTQ? They're just going to be worried about who did it.
Yeah.
To have officers just come up to me and say, well, you're gay. This is what you want anyway. That's not something that I want to hear from someone that's being paid to police.
And plus, we are paying them.
Exactly.
And they need to advocate for us.
Pay them.
Exactly.
And this is how y'all talk to us. This is the type of treatment that you all put upon the people that you're supposedly entrusted to watch over.
Tamika, so did you have to go? Did you report it to the police? Like, so is that the process? Like, there isn't really like an actual like system organization that is actually like solely focused on cases that are.
The first
There's
time
a specialized
to try to report, I went to another officer and he laughed at me. He said, "Good luck with that. You can go to one of the precincts, but you got to prove it."
Science.
You have to prove it.
Exactly.
And there's a rate. Yeah. So right now in the U.S. Police system, there's millions and millions of rape kits. So people went through those rape, like they're very invasive. After you were violated, then you have this cotton swab that goes in to test you, right? And they're collecting dust.
Yeah, right.
There's
Yeah, they're back up, right. But so my question is, like, are these done like by the police itself?
Yes.
I mean, right. So like that's my like my argument right there. So
police investigating the police. Okay.
I don't know. I don't see why the police. Like there should actually be a separate body that is solely, like specifically focused on this. Otherwise, I mean, I don't see that. It's the same thing that happens. I mean, not exactly the same, but it's kind of like situations when somebody calls because they're having a mental breakdown, and then they send the police officer, and they're not even trained for these situations.
Yeah.
They end up escalating it.
Yeah. So they end up escalating, and then they have somebody
in jail.
Yeah.
Violence.
Exactly. So why wouldn't it be an actual body that is specifically focused, that is trained, and that knows what they're doing, and that, you know, like that really care for survivors and victims of rape and assault.
Very
You know,
valid question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
actually
we
interesting.
really need to have like. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say it's actually interesting because I've had a situation where I was working as a case manager, and one of my clients had a domestic violence situation where there was a restriction order in place, and then the man came back and forced himself into the home, and we were trying to make a police report. My client was also diagnosed with schizophrenia at the time. But she wasn't having a psychotic episode. This actually happened, and the man actually placed like a knife to her throat and like, you know, like threatened how he was going to kill her and like bury her. And this was very serious. And we called the police, and the police came and said, well, she violated the restriction order by allowing him into the home. And she's probably having a psychotic break. And so you're the one who's supposed to be here helping her through it. And we're not going to make a report for that. So it's like the police try to, in any way possible, to avoid whatever work that they can, you know. So it's really like, it's no help. Police is no help.
No, they shouldn't even be involved in this, you know, in situations like this. So that's why I'm mentioning that. Aaron, you were gonna say something. Sorry, I jumped in the.
They're only going to come after the fact when there's a dead body. They're not there for prevention. They never did do any prevention. They'll escalate the situation so they can take someone to jail. But there wasn't anybody to escalate.
Yeah, no, and I think building on what you said, Melly, like, you know, with the police being pretty useless in that, and what you were saying, Velu, about having like, you know, a separate organization. I think, you know, we can also start with like trying to have accountability processes in community that are trauma informed, right? Like, and that actually like have accountability steps. Like transformative justice or restorative justice gets kind of talked about a lot, but like that's not really a great model for sexual assault, because, you know, sexual assault, rape victims, like as we've talked about, shouldn't have to like go face to face and have a conversation or a mediation with the person who has assaulted them, right?
Yeah.
And like if we're going to like have accountability processes, it can't just be like, oh, we had a conversation and somebody said sorry. Like, no, what is the follow-up there, right? Like, what is the follow-up for the survivor? And then also like, what is the follow-up for perpetrator? Or, you know, really coming to the space of like, you know, some people need to be removed from community spaces, or at least like, you know, it needs to be communicated enough, you know, not just the whisper network, right? Like it needs to be communicated loudly that, you know, that person is harmful and a risk to the other people in community.
I think this is an important question that just popped up. Is the person naming the trauma that they have caused necessary to an accountability process? I'm in the middle of this one, believe it or not. I think the process is the process. The process needs to be handled no matter if the perpetrator admits to the crime or not. So I don't necessarily care if the person is saying I didn't do it, but the process needs to happen of investigating and taking care of the victim. So I'm not necessarily sure. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but I'm not 100% sure if the perpetrator needs to say yes, I've done it, for the process to be valid.
How many of them are actually going to say, yeah, they did it?
Right.
You know, just me being able to name them and have them in the room, if I choose to, is enough. People need to know who the other party is, so that they can keep an eye on his behavior or his or her behavior, because women rape too.
100%.
So this is something that needs to be an open process, so that the community knows who the violator is, so that if there is a pattern, it can be brought to the light and there can be some kind of corrective measure taken. You cannot
So,
continue to let these people run around here unchecked. Somebody needs to talk about it. It doesn't mean that we have to go full bore, have the media all involved in it. There can be community conversations, community accountability without involving law enforcement.
so for me, I've tried to do that personally, and especially in the Indigenous community, um, a lot of like elder women would side with the elder men that are perpetrating because they will say that they have personally not experienced the rape or sexual violations, right? But usually perpetrators will uh, attack people that have like less representation, less community, more marginalized. So like when we make it about the community, if the community has not worked on their rape culture and decolonizing themselves away from that space, then like it just, you just end up hitting a wall. No matter how accountable you try to make that person out to be. Like personally, last year, I personally was, they were saying that they were going to sue me for defamation for me saying that it is not okay for this older man to touch me, and also for him to disrespect me in front of civil rights heroes. Calling me his PYT, his like pretty little thing.
Young thing.
Yeah, pretty young thing, and like just it's ridiculous. In front of the Gregorys, in front of like all the very important.
And this was defamation, so they were basically saying that he never did it.
Yeah, well, one, he's in denial, and two, I'm not the only one. There's other women, and other Indigenous women are silenced by their elders, and so it's me, an Indigenous person that's not Indigenous to North America, but Indigenous to my tribe, Burma. And so they're like, oh, well, she's not really Indigenous, so that doesn't really matter. And then there's other women that are also representing the missing and murdered Indigenous people that are not Indigenous themselves. And when they get sexually assaulted, now it becomes their problem, But when we stand in solidarity, then it's an our solidarity thing, Like there's like a kind of like a distancing. And you're seen as problematic for bringing it up.
I mean, it's such a complicated problem when it comes to like cultures, right? And like I'm Latino, and in Latin America, I'm from Colombia. Our country is extremely misogynistic and sexist, and homophobic, very religious. So it's a culture where like you're blamed because like the woman is always the like the one that was at fault if they're raped, and well, the men never talk about it ever. They never mention anything about it because like they have to show this like macho, like I'm the man, I don't show any feelings. So it's very pervasive. Like there is no way. I mean, if we have problems here about like equality, like I would say there like we're like 300 years behind.
Yeah.
And then we come here, cultures here that are from Latin America, it's the same problem.
Yeah.
So and ultimately, I mean, and I hate to say this, but it's up to us to sort of have to like push towards change, like us, like my culture, like my people, to like push for some sort of change. Yeah, because like that would be the only, I mean, the only way to really like seek change, like somebody from within.
Yeah.
And it hurts and it sucks, but that's the only way to do it.
It's been a male-driven society since biblical times, and they use scriptures to minimize women.
Yeah.
And I just don't get that, because Eve was not taken out of Adam's foot. We were taken out of his rib, which is right here at his side. You know, if we're going to, you know, believe in that, or if you believe in creationism or evolution, women came along just as well as men did. We have always been equal until they started the patriarchal societies, and men want to stay on the top, and to be on the top, they have to keep us in check and keep us underfoot.
Yep.
I'm not staying underfoot anymore. Being under their feet hurts me. It hurts people that look like me. And that's why we're here to break that down. We have to break it down now, because if we don't, what about my grandkids are coming up? What if they get caught up in this shit?
Yeah.
I don't want them to be hurt and harmed like I was. How many years it took me to get to the place where I am today? I wasted a lot of my life because of the traumas I experienced and the lack of understanding from my own community about the traumas I've had to live through. I've basically done this on my fucking own. And people still look at me like, look at crazy Tamika. Go figure.
Yeah, you're not crazy.
I think I'm crazier than a lot of them.
Erin, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was just saying, like, I think that's why having conversations like this is important, right? Like, talking to other survivors, being able to.
We're having problems hearing you. Like,
Let's see.
You're going
is this any
in and
better?
out. Yeah, that's better.
Oh, I was just saying that I think that's why conversations like this are important, right? Talking to other survivors, other people that are trauma informed, to validate and like stand with, right? Because so much of what we get from people that don't understand is so gaslighting and so damaging, that like having conversations like this to like hold that space and to acknowledge and to figure out, okay, well, how do we push and what do we do? Like, you know, we're a lot stronger when we're standing in solidarity, because the voices, you know, coming from other areas in society are so, you know, loud and almost deafening. So we kind of have to group together and sort of speak as one, right? And that doesn't mean like everybody's in the same process, but it's like we're all pushing for those processes, right? And supporting one another in that.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, we have to keep pushing forward and bringing intersectionality to these discussions, right? So it doesn't only affect, you know, a color of skin, or it doesn't only affect one gender. I mean, like this involves all of us. This involves all of us. And in order for some actual change, it needs to be something systematic in how we address and how we live and how we communicate.
And also representative from the media too. Like, I think most people get their information from that medium. So even besides like education, if we're representing real consent and not like an attitude of annoyance, but an attitude of like responsibility for promoting autonomy, that needs to happen.
Definitely.
And, you know, we as like grassroots organizers need to push for more media representation of stepping away from rape culture.
Yeah.
Right,
That's why this space is so important. Justine, I'm sorry.
It is, and at the very least, being able to identify a community of survivors like yourself. And this is why organizations like Taking Back Our Bodies and Men Healing are so important, because yes, they do the work to help heal, but they also foster a community and allow you to connect with other people who have been through what you've been through and survived. So you know you're not alone, and you know it's not going to be it shouldn't be a death sentence that you've been violated in the past.
Yeah. And at this point, I would also like to just share that I am starting a sexual assault support group for like just our community to come together as survivors to hear each other's stories. So if anybody would like to join that, just send an email over to sahealingcircle@dreamcityhealing.co, and we can be in contact and I'll talk to you guys further.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
Okay.
That's
All
a
right.
great
Well,
end.
yeah, it's been
Yeah.
an hour. It's been
Perfect.
great.
Thank you, guys.
Guys,
See you
thank
soon
you.
again.
See
Have a
you
good
next
night.
week.
Good
See you
night,
next
everyone.
week.
Yeah.
Before you leave, take a moment to feel into your body. Notice where you are experiencing sensation, if any, within your body. Now begin to reorient yourself to the room around you. Look to your left. Look to your right. Look in all directions, including behind you. And notice that you are safe here. Take a deep breath here. Notice the sensation of your feet and the soles of your feet. If you notice that your body is highly activated, take a few moments to stand up, move your arms and your legs, or go outside and take a walk, noticing the earth around you. Soften the focus of your eyes so you can come into your peripheral vision. If you're needing immediate support, please call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673. To dig into healing work with a somatic experiencing practitioner, you can find a practitioner local to you at www.traumahealing.org. If you want to work in a group, you can email Melly at sahealingcircle@dreamcityhealing.co or reach out to connect@dreamcityhealing.co if you need personal support in finding the resources that are right for you. Keep doing the work. It's worth it.